Think of the last time someone dismissed you, insulted you, or treated you as if you were invisible. Feel the reaction that comes: the heat, the impulse to respond, the desire to defend yourself. Now consider that a man who was enslaved, who had no legal rights, who could be sold or beaten without consequence, developed a method to make that reaction simply disappear. His name was Epictetus, and his method was not passive. It was devastating. Here is the paradox that most people never consider. The person who had the least external power in the entire Roman Empire, a man who was legally classified as property, possessed a kind of internal authority that emperors envied. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, studied his words, and what Epictetus taught about disrespect did not require strength, status, or retaliation. It required something far more difficult. It required a total revolution in how we interpret what happens to us. To understand how Epictetus arrived at this method, we need to understand where he came from. He was born around the year 50 AD in Hierapolis, a city in what is now southwestern Turkey. He was born into slavery. His very name tells us everything. Epictetus is not a proper name. It is a Greek word that simply means acquired. He was property from the moment he entered the world. His owner was a man named Epaphroditus, a wealthy freedman who had himself once been enslaved and who served as a secretary to the Emperor Nero. Epaphroditus was, by most accounts, a cruel master. There is a story passed down through the writings of the early Christian theologian Origen that Epaphroditus once twisted Epictetus's leg deliberately as a kind of punishment or display of dominance. Epictetus reportedly said, calmly, "You are going to break it." Epaphroditus kept twisting. The leg broke. And Epictetus said, without raising his voice, "Did I not tell you that you would break it?" He did not scream. He did not beg. He simply observed what was happening, as though it were happening to the leg, not to him. This moment, whether it is perfectly historical or slightly embellished by later writers, captures everything Epictetus would go on to teach. At some point, after Nero's death, in 68 AD, Epictetus was freed. He studied Stoic philosophy under Musonius Rufus, one of the most respected teachers in Rome. And around the year 93 AD, when the Emperor Domitian banished all philosophers from the city, Epictetus left for Nicópolis, a city on the western coast of Greece. There, he opened a school. He never wrote a single word. Everything we have from him, the discourses and the Enchiridion, was recorded by his student Arrian, who sat in his lectures and transcribed them. And it was in that modest school, in a provincial Greek city, that a former slave with a broken leg taught some of the most psychologically sophisticated ideas in the history of Western thought. So what exactly did Epictetus say we should do when someone insults us, disrespects us, or tries to humiliate us? His answer was not what we might expect. He did not say, suppress your anger. He did not say, pretend it does not hurt. He did not say, smile and walk away while your blood boils beneath the surface. That kind of suppression, as we will see later, actually makes things worse. What Epictetus proposed was something fundamentally different. He proposed reclassification. When someone insults you, the natural reaction is to treat the insult as a threat, as something that has been done to you. Epictetus argued that this interpretation is the entire problem. The insult itself is not what harms us. Our judgment about the insult is what harms us. In the Enchiridion, he wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. This is not a passive statement. It is an act of radical redefinition. When someone calls us a fool, the pain we feel does not come from the word. It comes from the fact that we have already, somewhere inside ourselves, agreed that being called a fool is intolerable. We have preloaded that word with significance. We have decided that our identity depends on other people not saying that word to us." Epictetus's technique, what we might call the "it is nothing to me" method, works by interrupting that chain of interpretation. When the insult arrives, instead of reacting to it as though it were an attack on our identity, we observe it as an external event. Someone has made sounds with their mouth. Someone has arranged words in a particular order. That is all that has actually happened. The question Epictetus forces us to ask is devastatingly simple. Does this person's opinion actually change anything about who I am? If we are honest, the answer is almost always no. And once we see that, the insult loses its weight. Not because we have suppressed our reaction, but because we have genuinely reevaluated the event itself. The anger was never about the words. It was about the meaning we assigned to the words. Change the meaning, and the anger has nothing left to attach itself to. This distinction between suppression and reclassification turns out to be one of the most important discoveries in modern psychology. In the year 2001, the psychologist James Gross at Stanford University published research that would reshape our understanding of emotion regulation. Gross identified two fundamentally different strategies that people use when dealing with difficult emotions. The first is suppression, the strategy most of us default to. We feel the anger, the shame, the hurt, and we push it down. We clench our jaw. We tell ourselves to let it go. We force a calm exterior while the storm rages internally. Gross's research showed that this strategy is not only ineffective, it is actively harmful. People who habitually suppress their emotions show increased physiological stress responses. Their blood pressure rises. Their cortisol levels stay elevated longer. And paradoxically, the emotion they are trying to eliminate often grows stronger precisely because they are fighting it. Suppression is an act of internal war, and wars always have casualties. The second strategy Gross identified is called cognitive reappraisal. This is the process of changing how we interpret an event before the full emotional response has time to develop. Instead of reacting to the insult and then trying to manage the reaction, we intervene at the level of meaning. We ask ourselves what this event actually signifies. We reframe it. And when we do that, when we change the interpretation rather than fighting the feeling, the emotional response itself changes. It does not need to be suppressed because it was never fully activated. Gross's research demonstrated that people who use cognitive reappraisal experience less negative emotion, show lower physiological stress, maintain better social relationships, and report higher overall well-being. In other words, Epictetus was right nearly 2,000 years before modern neuroscience confirmed it. So, how do we actually use this in real life? Here is the method, distilled into 3 steps that we can apply in real time. Step 1. Notice the gap. When someone disrespects us, there is always a brief space between the event and our reaction. Most of us skip over that space entirely. We go from stimulus to fury in a fraction of a second. The first step is simply to notice that the gap exists. We do not need to do anything in it yet. We just need to see it. Step 2. Question the interpretation. In that gap, we ask one question. What am I making this mean? Not what did they say, but what story am I telling myself about what they said? Am I telling myself that this person has the power to define my worth? Am I telling myself that I must be respected by everyone in order to be valuable? Usually, the story is far more dramatic than the event itself. Step 3. Reclassify the event. Once we see the story, we can choose a different one. Not a dishonest one. We do not pretend the person was being kind. We simply choose an interpretation that is more accurate and less self-destructive. This person is having a bad day. This person is projecting their own insecurity. This person's opinion has no bearing on my actual competence, my actual character, my actual life. The event remains the same. The meaning transforms completely. Epictetus understood something that we are only now beginning to appreciate fully. He understood that dignity is not something that can be given or taken by other people. It is something that exists or does not exist entirely within us. When we make our sense of self-worth dependent on how others treat us, we hand the keys to our inner life to every stranger, every critic, every person who wakes up in a bad mood and decides to take it out on us. We become, in a very real sense, enslaved to their opinions. And Epictetus, a man who knew what actual enslavement looked like, refused to accept that second form of bondage. In the Enchiridion, he wrote, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults,' else he would not have mentioned these alone." There is something extraordinary in that response. It is not defensive. It is not aggressive. It is not wounded. It is the response of a person who is so secure in their own self-knowledge that an insult becomes almost amusing, a sign that the other person does not know them well enough to find the real weaknesses. This is not arrogance. This is the kind of quiet, unshakable self-possession that comes from doing the internal work, from examining our own faults honestly, from building a character that does not need applause to know its own value. We live in an age where disrespect comes from every direction. It comes through screens, through comments, through the casual cruelty of people who will never know us. And the temptation is always the same: to react, to defend, to prove. But the Stoic response asks us to consider something more radical. What if the greatest form of power is not in the response we give to others, but in the response we give to ourselves? What if the person who cannot be insulted is not weak, but simply free? Epictetus spent his life as a slave and his freedom as a teacher. He had a broken leg and an unbreakable mind, and he left us a method that does not ask us to be stronger than our emotions. It asks us to be wiser than our interpretations. That is the Stoic response to disrespect. And it works because it addresses the only thing that was ever really under our control: the meaning we choose to assign to the world around us.